The crayon was still warm in Jessica Martinez's small hand when she vanished from Franklin Elementary School's playground at exactly 2:47 p.m. on October 12, 1990. She had been drawing a picture of her family, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, when something made her look up from the concrete where she sat cross-legged in her favorite purple dress. The drawing was never finished. The crayon rolled into the nearby storm drain forgotten, while Jessica simply ceased to exist in broad daylight with 200 other children playing within a stone's throw. If you think you know how children disappear, think again. What happened to 7-year-old Jessica Martinez would challenge everything investigators thought they understood about predators, evidence, and the terrible mathematics of chance that can destroy a family in 30 seconds. Subscribe right now, because the revelation that came 33 years later will change how you look at every missing child case forever. The warm Phoenix sun beat down on Franklin Elementary's asphalt playground, where children's laughter echoed off the red brick buildings that housed 800 students from kindergarten through 5th grade. October in Arizona meant perfect weather, 78 degrees with a cloudless sky that stretched endlessly over the Sonoran Desert. It was the kind of day that made parents grateful to live in Phoenix, where winter meant shorts and sandals instead of snow boots and heavy coats. Jessica Martinez had been looking forward to recess all morning. Her second-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had announced that anyone who finished their math worksheet early could have an extra 10 minutes of playground time before the afternoon dismissal. Jessica's small hand had shot up first when the worksheet was distributed, her pencil already moving across the paper with the focused determination that made her teachers smile. Addition problems that stumped her classmates seemed to solve themselves under her careful attention, numbers arranging themselves into neat columns that always added up correctly. At 20:45 p.m. Mrs. Patterson released the early finishers to join the rest of 2nd grade on the playground. Jessica burst through the heavy doors with the explosive energy that only 7-year-olds possess, her dark hair streaming behind her as she ran toward her favorite spot near the monkey bars. She carried her small box of crayons, the 64 pack with the built-in sharpener that her grandmother had given her for her birthday, and a sheet of construction paper, where she planned to create her latest masterpiece. The playground monitor, Mrs. Helen Rodriguez, was positioned at her usual spot near the basketball courts, where she could observe the entire recreation area with the watchful attention of someone who had supervised children for 15 years. She remembered Jessica settling onto the concrete near the monkey bars, spreading her paper carefully, and selecting a brown crayon to begin her drawing. The little girl's tongue poked out slightly in concentration as she began sketching the stick figures that would represent her family: Mama, Papa, baby brother Miguel, and herself. What happened in the next 2 minutes would baffle investigators for over 3 decades. Mrs. Rodriguez testified later that she had looked away from Jessica's corner of the playground to break up an argument between 2 4th graders who were disputing the rules of tetherball. The intervention took approximately 90 seconds, during which time her attention was completely focused on mediating the disagreement and ensuring that the situation didn't escalate into physical confrontation. When she turned back toward the monkey bars, expecting to see Jessica still working on her drawing, the little girl was gone. The construction paper remained exactly where Jessica had placed it, weighted down by the box of crayons to prevent it from blowing away in the desert breeze. The brown crayon lay beside the unfinished drawing, its tip still warm from Jessica's grip. Her purple backpack sat propped against the concrete base of the monkey bars, its zipper open to reveal her lunchbox, homework folder, and the small stuffed elephant named Peanuts that she carried everywhere. Everything Jessica owned was present and accounted for except Jessica herself. Rodriguez's first assumption was that Jessica had gone to the bathroom or gotten a drink of water from the fountain near the main building. Children frequently forgot to ask permission before leaving the playground, especially when they were absorbed in activities that captured their imagination. But a quick check of the restrooms and water fountains revealed no sign of the missing girl. The janitor confirmed that no children had passed through the main hallway in the past 10 minutes, and the school secretary verified that no students had come to the office requesting to call their parents. By 20:52 p.m., exactly 5 minutes after Jessica Martinez had last been seen drawing her family portrait, Franklin Elementary School was placed on lockdown. All exterior doors were secured, all classrooms were placed in safety mode, and every adult in the building began a systematic search of every room, closet, storage area, and hiding place where a 7-year-old girl might be found. The process took 47 minutes and yielded nothing except the growing certainty that Jessica Martinez was no longer on school property. The call to 911 was placed at 3:41 p.m. by Principal Janet Morrison, her voice steady despite the terror that was building in her chest as she reported a missing child to the Phoenix Police Department. The dispatcher's questions came rapid fire, establishing the basic facts that would define the investigation for decades to come. Jessica Martinez, age 7, Hispanic female, 3'8", tall, weighing approximately 52 pounds, last seen wearing a purple dress with white sandals, dark hair in ponytails secured with yellow ribbons, no known medical conditions, no history of wandering away from school. The first patrol car arrived at Franklin Elementary at 3:47 p.m., followed within minutes by Detective Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a 12-year veteran of the Phoenix Police Department who specialized in crimes against children. Chen understood the statistics better than most. In cases involving missing children, the first 3 hours were crucial. After that, the probability of finding a child alive and unharmed began its merciless decline with each passing minute. The initial response was swift and comprehensive. Additional patrol units cordoned off the school grounds while detective teams began interviewing witnesses and processing the area where Jessica had last been seen. K-9 units were deployed to track any scent trails that might lead away from the playground, while helicopter units from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department began aerial searches of the surrounding neighborhood and adjacent desert areas. The interviews with Jessica's classmates revealed nothing suspicious. Second-grade children made unreliable witnesses under the best circumstances, their memories influenced by suggestion and their attention spans too brief to capture crucial details. Most of Jessica's classmates hadn't even noticed her absence until teachers began asking specific questions about her whereabouts. Those who remembered seeing her described a perfectly normal recess period, Jessica drawing her picture. Other children playing on the equipment, Mrs. Rodriguez supervising from her usual position. The playground itself told a more disturbing story. Crime scene technicians processed Jessica's abandoned belongings with meticulous care, dusting for fingerprints that belonged only to the missing girl and her teacher. The construction paper was photographed in place before being collected as evidence, its surface revealing the beginnings of a family portrait that would never be completed. The brown crayon was bagged and labeled, though investigators understood that a child's art supply was unlikely to yield useful forensic evidence. More troubling was what the crime scene revealed about the logistics of Jessica's disappearance. The playground was surrounded by a 6-foot chain link fence topped with privacy slats that blocked the view from adjacent streets. There were only 2 exits from the recreation area, one leading back into the school building, and another opening onto the parking lot where parents gathered each afternoon for student pickup. Both exits were visible from Mrs. Rodriguez's supervisory position, making it theoretically impossible for a child to leave the playground without being observed. Detective Chen stood in the afternoon heat, surveying the playground from every possible angle, trying to understand how a 7-year-old girl could simply vanish from a secured area under active supervision. The fence was too high for Jessica to climb unassisted, and showed no signs of damage or forced entry. The parking lot exit remained locked during school hours, requiring a key that only school personnel possessed. The building entrance was monitored by security cameras that had recorded no unusual activity during the critical time period. As the search expanded beyond the school grounds, teams of volunteers began arriving to assist with the effort. Parents from Jessica's class organized into groups that would canvass the surrounding neighborhood, checking every yard, garage, shed, and hiding place where a small child might be found. Local businesses provided water and food for the searchers, while radio stations broadcast Jessica's description every 15 minutes throughout the afternoon and evening. The Martinez family arrived at the school as the sun was setting over the Phoenix skyline, painting the desert mountains in shades of orange and purple that would forever remind them of the day their world ended. Carlos Martinez, a construction worker whose calloused hands shook as he held his daughter's school photograph, spoke with Detective Chen in halting English that conveyed his desperation more clearly than perfect grammar ever could. His wife, Maria, clutched their 3-year-old son Miguel against her chest and stared at the playground where Jessica had last been seen, as if willing her daughter to materialize from the gathering darkness. The first 24 hours of the investigation followed the established protocol for missing children cases. Detective Chen coordinated with multiple agencies: Phoenix Police, Maricopa County Sheriff's Department, Arizona Department of Public Safety, and the FBI's Crimes Against Children Unit. Jessica's photograph was distributed to law enforcement agencies throughout the Southwest, and her description was entered into the National Crime Information Center database that would alert officers across the country to be watching for a missing Phoenix girl. The media response was immediate and intense. Jessica's school photograph appeared on every local news broadcast, accompanied by emotional appeals from her parents and detailed descriptions of her clothing and physical appearance. The local Spanish-language television stations provided extensive coverage that reached Phoenix's large Hispanic community, while radio stations interrupted regular programming to broadcast Jessica's information throughout the day. By the second day, search teams had expanded their efforts to cover a 5-mile radius around Franklin Elementary School. Volunteers organized by the local chapter of Texas EquiSearch used ground-penetrating radar to examine suspicious areas in nearby desert locations, while helicopter crews from the Arizona National Guard joined the aerial search that covered hundreds of square miles of rugged terrain. The effort was impressive by any standard, but the vastness of the Sonoran Desert made comprehensive coverage virtually impossible. The investigation into potential suspects began with the systematic review of every registered sex offender within a 50-mile radius of Phoenix. Detective Chen personally interviewed 67 individuals whose criminal histories included crimes against children, looking for any connection to Franklin Elementary School or the surrounding neighborhood. Each interview followed the same pattern: initial denials, requests for alibis, and ultimately verifiable accounts of their whereabouts during the crucial time period when Jessica had disappeared. School personnel underwent intensive background checks that revealed nothing suspicious. Mrs. Rodriguez had worked at Franklin Elementary for 15 years without a single complaint or disciplinary action. Her supervision of the playground had been consistent with established protocols, and multiple witnesses confirmed that she had been visible throughout the recess period. The janitor, cafeteria workers, and office staff all provided alibis that placed them in different areas of the building when Jessica vanished. The most promising lead emerged during the third week of the investigation, when Detective Chen discovered that a maintenance worker named Robert Kemp had been performing roof repairs on the school building during the weeks leading up to Jessica's disappearance. Kemp had daily access to Franklin Elementary, intimate knowledge of the building's layout, and opportunities to observe the playground routines that might have allowed him to plan an abduction. More concerning was his criminal history: a 1987 conviction for indecent exposure that had resulted in mandatory registration as a sex offender. The interview with Robert Kemp took place at the Phoenix Police Department's downtown headquarters, in a small room equipped with recording equipment and two-way mirrors that allowed supervisors to observe the conversation. Kemp appeared nervous but cooperative, answering Chen's questions with the careful precision of someone who understood that his criminal history made him an automatic suspect in any case involving a missing child. Kemp's alibi seemed solid initially. He claimed to have been working on the roof of Franklin Elementary's gymnasium during the time when Jessica disappeared, a location that would have made it impossible for him to observe or access the playground where she was last seen. The school's maintenance supervisor confirmed that roof work had been scheduled for that afternoon, and work orders documented Kemp's assignment to the gymnasium project. But Detective Chen's experience had taught her to verify every detail of suspect alibis, particularly when dealing with individuals whose criminal histories suggested potential predatory behavior. A more thorough examination of the maintenance records revealed discrepancies that couldn't be easily explained. The materials list for the gymnasium roof project included items that hadn't been delivered to the job site until 2 days after Jessica's disappearance. The work orders had been backdated, and the maintenance supervisor admitted under questioning that his memory of specific work assignments from 3 weeks earlier wasn't entirely reliable. More disturbing was the discovery that Kemp had been observed near the playground area on multiple occasions during the weeks before Jessica vanished. A substitute teacher remembered seeing him cleaning windows in the main building's second floor, which provided a clear view of the recreation area where children played during recess. The school secretary recalled Kemp asking questions about the daily schedule, specifically inquiring about recess times and playground supervision procedures. The circumstantial evidence against Robert Kemp continued building as Chen's investigation expanded. A review of his employment history revealed a pattern of jobs at elementary schools throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area, each position lasting only a few months before he moved on to another district. Several schools reported minor thefts of playground equipment or classroom supplies during the periods when Kemp had been employed, though no formal charges had ever been filed. Chen discovered that Kemp owned a white panel van that multiple witnesses had observed parked near Franklin Elementary during the weeks preceding Jessica's disappearance. The vehicle's license plate had been noted by a crossing guard who remembered thinking it seemed unusual for a maintenance worker to be driving such a large vehicle to perform routine repairs. The van's description matched reports from other elementary schools where Kemp had worked, suggesting a pattern of surveillance that had gone undetected by school administrators. The forensic examination of Kemp's van revealed trace evidence that would prove crucial to the investigation. Carpet fibers found in the vehicle's cargo area were consistent with the material used in Franklin Elementary's classrooms, though this evidence could be explained by Kemp's legitimate access to the building. More significant were the child-sized fingerprints discovered on the van's interior door handles, prints that were too small to belong to Kemp's adult children, and couldn't be explained by any legitimate reason for children to have been inside the vehicle. The breakthrough came when Chen discovered that Kemp had purchased a shovel and several bags of quicklime from a home improvement store on the afternoon of Jessica's disappearance. The transaction had been captured on security cameras that showed Kemp making the purchases at 4:17 p.m., less than 2 hours after Jessica was last seen at the school playground. The receipt, recovered from Kemp's wallet during a consent search of his residence, provided a timeline that contradicted his claims about working on the gymnasium roof all afternoon. Detective Chen knew she was building a circumstantial case that would require careful presentation to convince a jury. Each piece of evidence might have innocent explanations when considered individually, but together they formed a pattern that suggested Robert Kemp had been planning Jessica Martinez's abduction for weeks before actually carrying it out. The challenge would be locating Jessica's remains and finding physical evidence that directly connected Kemp to her disappearance. The search warrant for Kemp's residence was executed on November 8, 1990, exactly 27 days after Jessica Martinez had vanished from Franklin Elementary's playground. Detective Chen led a team of investigators and forensic technicians through Kemp's modest home in a working-class neighborhood on Phoenix's west side, looking for any evidence that might confirm his involvement in Jessica's disappearance or reveal what had happened to her after she was taken from the school. The house revealed the lifestyle of a solitary man whose interests seemed focused on monitoring the activities of local elementary schools. A spare bedroom had been converted into an office where Kemp maintained detailed files on multiple school districts, including maps, schedules, personnel rosters, and photographs of playground areas taken from public locations. The files were organized with obsessive precision, Each school's information contained in separate folders that documented recess times, security procedures, and the daily routines that governed children's activities. More disturbing were the personal items that Kemp had collected from various schools: playground balls, jump ropes, children's artwork, and small toys that appeared to have been taken from classroom or recreation areas. Each item was carefully labeled with the school's name and the date it was acquired, creating a catalog of trophies that represented Kemp's unauthorized access to environments where children gathered daily. The most significant discovery came in Kemp's garage, where investigators found a hidden compartment beneath a workbench that contained items specifically connected to Franklin Elementary School. Jessica Martinez's yellow hair ribbons were preserved in a plastic bag, along with a portion of the construction paper she had been using for her family drawing. Most damning was a small digital camera that contained photographs taken through the classroom windows of Franklin Elementary, showing children at work and play in what should have been secure environments. The photographs revealed the extent of Kemp's surveillance activities in the weeks before Jessica's disappearance. Images dated throughout September and early October showed children playing on the playground, eating lunch in the cafeteria, and working at their desks in classrooms. Several photographs focused specifically on Jessica Martinez, capturing her daily routines with the precision of someone who had been studying her behavior patterns in preparation for an opportunity to act. Detective Chen understood that the evidence found in Kemp's residence provided strong circumstantial proof of his guilt, but the most crucial question remained unanswered. Where was Jessica Martinez? Kemp's continued denials of involvement in her disappearance meant that investigators would need to locate her remains through other means, a challenge complicated by the vast desert terrain surrounding Phoenix and the passage of nearly 4 weeks since her abduction. The interrogation of Robert Kemp began on the evening of November 8 and continued intermittently for 3 days as Detective Chen attempted to break through the suspect's wall of denials and obtain information about Jessica's location. Kemp was represented by a public defender who advised him to remain silent, but Chen's experience in interviewing suspects had taught her to recognize the signs of guilt that no attorney could completely suppress. Kemp's body language betrayed his attempts to appear cooperative and innocent. His hands trembled when shown photographs of Jessica Martinez, and his voice changed pitch when Chen asked specific questions about his activities on October 12. Most tellingly, Kemp demonstrated detailed knowledge of Jessica's daily routines that extended far beyond what a casual observer would notice. Describing her preference for sitting near the monkey bars during recess and her habit of organizing her crayons by color before beginning any drawing project. The breakthrough came when Chen confronted Kemp with the receipts for the shovel and quicklime purchases, along with security camera footage that showed him making the transactions on the afternoon of Jessica's disappearance. Faced with evidence that contradicted his alibi and timeline, Kemp's composure finally cracked. His confession came in fragmented sentences punctuated by tears and desperate attempts to minimize his culpability. According to Kemp's statement, Jessica's abduction had been planned for weeks but executed impulsively when he observed her sitting alone near the monkey bars during the brief period when Mrs. Rodriguez was distracted by the tetherball dispute. Kemp claimed he had been hiding in a storage shed adjacent to the playground, waiting for an opportunity that might never come, when Jessica's isolation presented the perfect chance to act without witnesses. The actual abduction had taken less than 30 seconds. Kemp described approaching Jessica from behind while she was focused on her drawing, covering her mouth to prevent her from screaming, and carrying her to his van, which was parked in an area of the school parking lot not visible from the playground. Jessica had struggled briefly but had been overpowered by Kemp's adult strength and the element of surprise that had prevented her from calling for help. The most devastating part of Kemp's confession dealt with what happened after Jessica was taken from Franklin Elementary. He described driving to a remote desert location approximately 45 miles northeast of Phoenix, near the town of Carefree, where he had previously identified a secluded area suitable for his purposes. The location was accessible only by a dirt road that branched off from State Route 74, marked by distinctive rock formations that would allow search teams to identify the site. Detective Chen forced herself to maintain professional composure, as Kemp described Jessica Martinez's final hours in clinical terms that made his crimes seem even more horrific. The little girl had died within 24 hours of her abduction, and Kemp had buried her remains in a shallow grave that he had concealed with rocks and desert vegetation. The shovel and quicklime purchases had been intended to prevent the discovery of evidence that might connect him to Jessica's disappearance. The search for Jessica's remains began at dawn on November 12, 1990, with teams of investigators and volunteers converging on the desert location described in Kemp's confession. The terrain was rugged and unforgiving, characterized by rocky outcroppings, dense patches of creosote bush, and the kind of isolation that had made it attractive to someone seeking to conceal evidence of a terrible crime. Ground-penetrating radar units were deployed to scan areas that matched Kemp's description, while cadaver dogs worked methodically through the search grid established by Detective Chen. The grave was located at 2:47 p.m. exactly 1 month after Jessica Martinez had last been seen drawing her family portrait at Franklin Elementary School. The timing felt like a cruel coincidence that underscored the precision with which this investigation had unfolded from the very beginning. Jessica's remains were found exactly where Kemp had indicated, buried beneath rocks and desert debris in a location so remote that they might never have been discovered without his confession. The recovery of Jessica's body brought a mixture of relief and renewed grief to her family and the Phoenix community that had spent 4 weeks hoping for her safe return. The certainty of her death eliminated the possibility of a miracle reunion, but it also meant that Robert Kemp could be prosecuted for murder rather than kidnapping, ensuring that justice would be served for the crime that had shattered so many lives. The forensic examination of Jessica's remains confirmed the details of Kemp's confession and provided additional evidence of his guilt. Fragments of purple fabric found with the body matched the dress Jessica had been wearing when she disappeared, while dental records definitively confirmed her identity. Most significantly, trace evidence collected from the burial site included fibers that matched the carpeting in Kemp's van, creating a direct physical link between the suspect and the location where Jessica's body had been concealed. The trial of Robert Kemp began on March 15, 1991, in Maricopa County Superior Court, drawing national media attention and filling every available seat in the courtroom with reporters, victim advocacy representatives, and Phoenix residents who had followed Jessica's case from the beginning. The prosecution's case was methodical and comprehensive, presenting the surveillance evidence, the forensic connections, and Kemp's detailed confession in a narrative that left little room for reasonable doubt about his guilt. Kemp's defense attorneys attempted to challenge the validity of his confession, arguing that it had been coerced through intensive interrogation techniques and that their client's mental health issues made him susceptible to false admissions of guilt. However, the physical evidence supporting every detail of Kemp's statement made it impossible to dismiss his confession as unreliable, particularly when crime scene findings matched his descriptions of Jessica's burial location and the circumstances of her death. The most powerful moment of the trial came when Maria Martinez took the witness stand to deliver a victim impact statement that left the courtroom in absolute silence. She spoke in accented English about her daughter's love of drawing, her excitement about learning to read, and her dreams of becoming a teacher when she grew up. She described the agony of 4 weeks of not knowing Jessica's fate, followed by the devastating confirmation that their little girl would never come home again. Robert Kemp was convicted of first-degree murder on April 8, 1991, and sentenced to death by lethal injection. The judge's words were measured and final, describing Kemp's crimes as particularly heinous due to the victim's age and vulnerability, the premeditated nature of the abduction, and the defendant's betrayal of the trust placed in him as a school employee. As the sentence was announced, Kemp showed no visible emotion. Staring straight ahead with the same blank expression he had maintained throughout the trial. The resolution of Jessica Martinez's case brought closure to a community that had lived with fear and uncertainty for months, but it came at a price that could never be fully calculated. A family had been destroyed by the loss of their daughter and sister. Franklin Elementary School had been forever changed by the violation of its security, and the loss of innocence that comes with understanding how quickly tragedy can strike. The broader Phoenix community had learned that the monsters parents warned their children about weren't just creatures from fairy tales, but real predators who walked among them disguised as ordinary people. But this story doesn't end with Robert Kemp's execution in 1997. What happened 33 years later would prove that even solved cases can hold secrets that challenge everything we think we know about justice, evidence, and the terrible complexity of human evil. Detective Marcus Williams had been working cold cases for the Phoenix Police Department for 8 years when the call came in on a quiet Tuesday morning in October 2023. The DNA laboratory at the Arizona Department of Public Safety had been processing evidence from unsolved cases dating back to the 1980s, part of a statewide initiative to apply modern forensic techniques to older investigations that had been closed due to technological limitations. The technician's voice carried a note of confusion that immediately caught Williams' attention. The Jessica Martinez case had been solved and prosecuted 33 years earlier, but routine processing of stored evidence had yielded an unexpected result. DNA extracted from clothing fibers found at Jessica's burial site had produced a profile that didn't match Robert Kemp, the man who had confessed to her murder and been executed for the crime in 1997. Williams felt a chill run through his body as he absorbed the implications of this discovery. If Kemp's DNA wasn't present at the burial site, it raised fundamental questions about his guilt that should have been impossible to ask after his conviction and execution. The case file indicated that Kemp had provided detailed knowledge of the crime scene that only Jessica's killer could have possessed, but the genetic evidence suggested that someone else had been responsible for placing her body in that desert grave. The re-examination of the Jessica Martinez case began with a comprehensive review of all physical evidence that had been preserved from the original investigation. Modern DNA testing techniques were applied to items that had been considered useless in 1991, when genetic analysis required much larger samples and could only process fresh biological material. Hair follicles, fabric fibers, and soil samples from the burial site were subjected to analysis that hadn't existed when Robert Kemp was prosecuted for Jessica's murder. The results were stunning in their consistency and their implications. DNA profiles extracted from multiple pieces of evidence all pointed to the same unknown individual, someone whose genetic signature had never been entered into any criminal database, despite the expansion of DNA collection programs over the past 3 decades. More disturbing was the complete absence of any genetic material that could be attributed to Robert Kemp, suggesting that he had never been present at the location where Jessica's body was found. Williams understood that he was looking at evidence of a wrongful execution, one of the most serious failures possible in the American criminal justice system. But the complexity of the situation extended beyond simple wrongful conviction. Kemp had confessed to Jessica's murder in detail, providing information about the crime scene that had been verified by investigators. His possession of Jessica's hair ribbons and construction paper created physical connections that seemed impossible to explain if he hadn't been involved in her abduction. The breakthrough came when Williams decided to re-examine the circumstances of Kemp's confession, applying modern understanding of false confession psychology to an interrogation that had taken place over 30 years earlier. Contemporary research had revealed that suspects with certain mental health conditions or cognitive limitations could be induced to confess to crimes they hadn't committed, particularly when presented with evidence that seemed to prove their guilt and subjected to intensive questioning over extended periods. A review of Kemp's medical records, which hadn't been thoroughly examined during the original investigation, revealed a history of mental illness that included episodes of dissociation and false memory formation. His previous therapist, located after extensive searching, confirmed that Kemp had demonstrated a pattern of adopting suggested memories as his own experiences, particularly when under stress or pressure from authority figures. Williams began to construct an alternative theory of Jessica Martinez's disappearance that accounted for both the DNA evidence and the seemingly impossible accuracy of Kemp's confession. What if Kemp had been present at Franklin Elementary and had witnessed Jessica's abduction by another person? His detailed knowledge of the crime could have come from observation rather than participation, while his possession of Jessica's personal items might have resulted from his discovery of evidence that the actual perpetrator had discarded. The investigation expanded to examine other individuals who had access to Franklin Elementary School during the period leading up to Jessica's disappearance. Williams discovered that the school had employed several temporary workers and contractors in addition to Robert Kemp, including individuals whose background checks had been less thorough than current standards would require. Many of these workers had scattered to other cities and states in the intervening decades, making it difficult to locate them for questioning or DNA comparison. The most promising lead emerged when Williams identified a substitute janitor named Thomas Mitchell, who had worked at Franklin Elementary during the weeks before Jessica's abduction. Mitchell's employment had been brief and largely undocumented, arranged through a temporary service that had ceased operations in the mid-1990s. More significantly, Mitchell had left Phoenix immediately after Jessica's disappearance, relocating to Nevada without providing forwarding information to his employer or completing scheduled work assignments. The search for Thomas Mitchell consumed months of investigative effort, complicated by his use of multiple aliases and his apparent pattern of avoiding situations that would require official identification or background checks. Williams eventually traced Mitchell to Las Vegas, where he had been living under an assumed name and working cash, only jobs that allowed him to remain invisible to law enforcement databases. The confrontation with Mitchell took place in a downtown Las Vegas hotel room where the 71-year-old man had been staying while working as an unlicensed maintenance worker for various casino properties. Mitchell initially denied any knowledge of Jessica Martinez or Franklin Elementary School, but his demeanor changed dramatically when Williams mentioned DNA evidence and the possibility of extradition to Arizona to face murder charges. Mitchell's confession was more detailed and horrifying than Robert Kemp's had been 33 years earlier. He described weeks of surveillance at Franklin Elementary, studying the playground routines and identifying Jessica as a potential victim due to her habit of playing alone during recess periods. The actual abduction had been carefully planned and executed during the brief window when Mrs. Rodriguez was distracted, with Mitchell hiding in maintenance areas of the school building until the opportunity presented itself. Most devastating was Mitchell's revelation that Robert Kemp had indeed witnessed Jessica's abduction, but had been too frightened to report what he had seen. Mitchell had threatened Kemp with violence if he contacted police, but had underestimated the maintenance worker's psychological fragility and his tendency to internalize traumatic experiences as personal memories. When Kemp was arrested and interrogated about Jessica's disappearance, his confused mental state had led him to confess to crimes he had observed rather than committed. The DNA evidence from Jessica's burial site belonged to Thomas Mitchell, confirming his guilt and vindicating Robert Kemp posthumously. Mitchell had taken Jessica to the desert location he described in his confession, where he had killed her and concealed her body using techniques he had learned during military service in Vietnam. The physical evidence that had seemed to implicate Kemp, the shovel and quicklime purchases, the presence of Jessica's personal items in his possession, had resulted from Mitchell's manipulation of a mentally vulnerable man who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The revelation that Arizona had executed an innocent man for Jessica Martinez's murders sent shockwaves through the state's criminal justice system and sparked national discussions about the reliability of confessions and the finality of capital punishment. Governor Katie Hobbs issued a formal apology to Robert Kemp's family and ordered a comprehensive review of all death penalty cases prosecuted in Arizona over the past 4 decades. Thomas Mitchell was extradited to Phoenix and charged with first-degree murder in January 2024. 3 years after Jessica Martinez had been killed and 6 years after Robert Kemp had been executed for crimes he didn't commit. The case highlighted fundamental flaws in the investigation and prosecution that had led to one of Arizona's most serious wrongful executions. While providing long overdue justice for Jessica's family, the trial of Thomas Mitchell began in September 2024. Presided over by Judge Patricia Herrera in the same courthouse where Robert Kemp had been wrongfully convicted 3 decades earlier. The prosecution's case relied heavily on DNA evidence and Mitchell's detailed confession, supported by witness testimony that placed him at Franklin Elementary during the crucial period when Jessica was abducted. Mitchell's defense attorneys attempted to challenge the reliability of DNA testing on evidence that had been stored for over 30 years, arguing that contamination or degradation might have produced false results. However, multiple independent laboratories had confirmed the genetic profile matches, and the consistency of results across different types of evidence made challenges to the DNA evidence largely ineffective. The most emotional moment of the trial came when Maria Martinez, now 67 years old and still living in Phoenix, took the witness stand to confront her daughter's actual killer after 33 years of believing that justice had already been served. She spoke about the additional trauma inflicted by learning that an innocent man had died for crimes he didn't commit, and her complex feelings about a justice system that had failed both her family and Robert Kemp's relatives. Thomas Mitchell was convicted of first-degree murder on November 15, 2024, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Arizona had abolished the death penalty by the time of his trial, preventing the state from executing another person for Jessica Martinez's murder. The judge's sentencing remarks acknowledged the tragic complexity of a case that had resulted in 2 different men being held responsible for the same crime, separated by over 3 years. The resolution of Jessica Martinez's case, both the original prosecution and its devastating correction, provided closure of a different kind for Phoenix residents who had followed the story from its beginning. Justice had finally been served for Jessica's murder, but it came at the terrible cost of recognizing that the system designed to protect society had executed an innocent man, while allowing the actual killer to remain free for 33 years. The Jessica Martinez case stands as a stark reminder that even solved crimes can hold secrets that challenge our understanding of justice, evidence, and the fallibility of human institutions. Subscribe to stay informed about cold cases where modern science continues to reveal truths that were hidden for decades. And share your thoughts about this case in the comments below. If this case has shown you anything, it's that the truth has a way of emerging even after decades of silence. The DNA that solved this case had been sitting in evidence storage for 33 years, waiting for technology to catch up with justice. How many other cases are waiting for someone to ask the right questions or apply the right techniques? Hit that subscribe button right now because we're just getting started uncovering the cold cases that time forgot. Next week, we'll dive into the 1987 disappearance of the Thompson family from their locked house in Tucson, a case where the evidence was hiding in plain sight for 37 years before modern forensics revealed what really happened that night. And don't forget to ring that notification bell, so you never miss when we upload the conclusion to mysteries that have haunted families and communities for decades. Because in the world of cold cases, the story is never really over until every secret has been exposed and every question has been answered. The warm crayon in Jessica Martinez's hand had rolled into a storm drain 33 years ago, forgotten while a community searched for answers that wouldn't come for over 3 decades. But truth, like DNA, doesn't decay with time. It waits patiently in the darkness until someone finally knows how to make it speak.